If there's a topic when it comes to video games that I consider interesting to dive into, it's regional differences, specifically Japanese differences. There's something about the changes made to a game when it goes through localization that I just feel it's worth talking about. Trust me, it goes beyond changing only the language sometimes. And it can go from really minor changes like this guy blocking a road in the very first Pokemon games in Japan, being mad about not having his morning coffee in the Western localization, but actually being drunk in the original Japanese version, to an entire game being redesigned for Western audiences, which was the case for Magikaru Hatu Nobutobi Tabo Daiboken, or Magical Flying Hat Turbo for the Sega Mega Drive in Japan, which became the Cap Attack in other regions, and will have its art, plot, music and level designs all changed. But the series I'm here to talk about today is one that is near and dear to my heart, because it is one that I grew up with, and still enjoy to this day, Spyro the Dragon. Now, I made a video talking about the unreleased Japanese version of Spyro 3 a couple years ago, and since then I've been wanting to make a video covering the Japanese version of Spyro 1, since it's a pretty interesting case of a localized product that honestly does feel like an entirely different game. But as I was working on this video, I figured I would also talk about the Japanese version of Spyro 2, since they are both equally interesting and surreal. And unfortunately, these are not good versions. Yes, they are weird enough to be enthralling, but that doesn't mean they're great. In fact, they are quite bad. But they are still decent enough to make a video on them, so let's get right into it. The very first Spyro game, developed by Insomniac and released in 1998 for Western audiences, was one of the most beloved platformers of that era, providing a very nice open-world experience that contrasted with other games of the time that had a more straightforward, linear platforming formula. The whole concept of exploring hub worlds that had levels scattered around them is an aspect that I'm a big fan of when it comes to 3D platformers, and that games like Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie also pioneered back in the day. And the concept of the game is pretty simple as it is. You go around worlds and levels, rescue dragons trapped in crystal, collect gems and defeat bosses until you get to Nasty Nork. And if you feel like completing the game to its full capacity, you get to explore an extra level in the form of Nasty's loot. Overall, a pretty decent start in the Spyro franchise. Not my favorite game personally, as that title will go to Spyro 2. But this game is still a lot of fun to play every now and then. And in April of 1999, Spyro made a leap into Japanese audiences. And let me tell you, it does get interesting from here. Let's start with Spyro's design. While it does remain the same in-game in terms of the model used and stuff, when comparing the front covers of the Western and Japanese versions, there is a noticeable difference. While in America and Europe, Spyro was presented as this fierce, badass little dragon who pretty much establishes himself as the hero who looks ready to flame some Nork butt, in the Japanese version, he got redesigned as this more lenient looking, innocent creature, pretty much looking like something out of an anime. And this will definitely let you know that these two games are at least somewhat different before you even play them. Also, yes, the way Spyro is written in Japanese, more specifically in the katakana alphabet, which would be Spyro, does read like the word Ripto. And yes, that is where the main villain of the second game, Ripto, will get his name. Worth mentioning too is that there is a manual depicting the story of the game, as well as gameplay tips in this art style, which by the looks of it seems more detailed than the initial cutscene. Once you start playing the game, however, you will notice easily the two most significant differences the Japanese version has compared to the Western ones: the camera and movement. While in the Western versions of the game, the camera is really responsive and Spyro feels smooth to control and his movement is fast-paced, in the Japanese version, the camera has changed to be more inactive and less responsive, making it not follow Spyro properly and, oftentimes, making it a nuisance by getting stuck in places and just being overall annoying. And when it comes to Spyro's movement, somehow they managed to make an enjoyable controlling character a drag, as he became significantly slower, and by the looks of it, charging doesn't even increase his speed, and it's just there to make it seem like he moves faster when he clearly doesn't. The only times in the Japanese version where the camera and movement behave in the same fashion as the Western version is when you use the super dash. Then and only then will you feel some sense of actual speed in this version of the game. Which sounds about right, since if they kept the normal camera or speed decrease for the super dash sections, this game will be just unplayable, period. It seems that the reason these bizarre changes were made to the Japanese version was because when the game was showcased to Japanese audiences in 1998, people apparently showed signs of headaches and motion sickness due to the game being too fast, and the 3D open worlds being too big, which in a way it's understandable. Some people are just not going to like the fast pace implemented in some games, and are gonna want to take it easy exploring the overall area. The problem here is that these changes made the experience a lot worse. I will argue that even Japanese gamers didn't like the different camera and movement, but hey, that's just my own speculation. And if this really managed preventing headaches and such for the Japanese audience, I guess that's at least one positive aspect from this whole conundrum. Another significant change made to this version was the implementation of signs all over the game. And when I say all over, I genuinely mean it. There are signs in every nook and cranny you may imagine, and this has been implemented yet again due to the apparent overwhelming nature the Japanese audience seemed to have issues with. These are divided by colors, with blue giving you tips regarding controls, white telling you tips about objects or the environment surrounding you, and red just giving you random tips that may be unrelated. That's my interpretation anyway. The nature of the game single-handedly spawned three of the most evident changes when this game got localized. That is honestly kind of impressive. It just goes to show how an audience from across the globe with a completely different perspective when it comes to gaming approaches a Western product. While they do make the overall experience more unbearable in my opinion, if it suits the Japanese audience better and those changes makes them enjoy the game more, then I recognize that and respect it. One interesting fact about the signs is that near the area where you jump on all the stone platforms in a pond in order to unlock Sunny Flight, there are two white signs. One outside the pond and another one in the spot the portal is bound to appear, which can only mean this game could give away how to get to Sunny Flight in the form of tips. What's interesting about this is that the dragon we rescue in the Western version of the game, specifically Lucas in Wizard's Peak, does tell us about the puzzle in Artisans to unlock Sunny Flight. But if the white signs in the Japanese version tell us about this puzzle, then that will make Lucas' dialogue in the Japanese version redundant, if it was the same as the Western version. If there's any Japanese speaking person who might stumble across this video, you are more than welcome to help me out solving this mystery and write it down what Lucas says in the comments.
Listen carefully, Spyro. There's a secret area in the artisan home. It is at the waterfall. Try jumping on the stones there.
Artisan home, waterfall. Sounds good.
スパイロー、しばらく見ないうちにずいぶん顔つきがたくましくなったな。この調子で残りの仲間の救出も頼んだぞ。
頑張ってみる。任せてよ。
Moving on from that, we have a couple more interesting changes, such as the order of the levels. Much like the first Super Mario Bros., the levels are labeled by numbers, this being World-Level. For example, Artisans is World 1 and Stonehill is level 1 in this game. Therefore, Stonehill will be labeled 1-1. Dark Hollow being the second level will be labeled 1-2. And Dry Canyon, the first level from Peacekeepers, the second world, will be labeled 2-1, with bosses and flight levels being levels number 4 and 5 respectively. However, you can still enter the levels in whatever order you want in the Japanese version. It's not like you have to complete one to unlock the next one, they are all already available. I suppose the reason they added this change was so that there is an established order when it comes to where the players must go in terms of levels, which could also have been done as some sort of help to the worlds being too big and easy to get lost for Japanese gamers. Now, let's talk about Spyro himself, who is voiced by Carlos Alarzaki in this game, before the role went to Tom Kenny from Spyro 2 onwards. In the Japanese version, Spyro is voiced by a woman, specifically by Akiko Yahima, who not only gives Spyro a brand new, younger personality, but also makes noises almost every time he jumps, glides, charges, and always when he falls to his death.
でもナスティノークは僕がやっつけてやるよ。
He also will say "Yatta," which means "I did it" in Japanese, every time he fully completes a level, although it could be translated as a general expression of excitement as well. And not only did Spyro change, but also Sparks, your little dragonfly companion that serves as a health meter. Usually, this is measured by his color, with him being yellow at full health, then upon taking a hit becoming blue, green, and then disappearing, with yellow having a shining yellow bright light around him, blue having sparkles of different colors, and green having no aura. Well, in the Japanese version, Sparks is permanently green, and the only way to figure out where he's at when it comes to health is by his aura, which he keeps from the Western versions. The reason behind Sparks being only green in this version is because green is more associated with life and energy than yellow is, which, in a way, does make sense. But if you ask me, I feel like this was a pointless change, as Sparks' measure of health is already good as it is, and I feel Japanese players will not have had any issues with it. Another expected change is the use of new names for the worlds and levels, with the worlds being labeled as gardens, except for Nork Nexus, which will just be called Nasty's World. As for the levels themselves, while some kept their name from the Western versions, others changed completely, with every boss having its name changed, and the flight levels replacing the word flight with sky. Even the names of the dragons you rescue in the Japanese version are slightly different, with the names being rewritten in katakana, for example, Nestor becoming Nesuta, and adding a surname depending on their homeworld and body type. And interestingly enough, some names seem to have been mistakenly swapped, like Andor being a Subaru, but Asher being Andoru. And going back to the levels, there are some design changes made to the Japanese version that are a tad questionable. And while some of these changes make the game easier, others are just pointless, like removing towers and roofs. My favorite pointless design change is in the level Yak, where they remove 2 enemy towers and replace their gems to be in the ground instead. Why was this done? I have absolutely no idea. Another change that I actually haven't indulged into much, and one that I haven't figured out how to record, is the compatibility with Pocket Station, which was a Tamagotchi type of device released only in Japan in 1999. But essentially, when you connect this device to the PlayStation while playing the Japanese version of Spyro, a total of 30 Dragonfly eggs will appear throughout the game, with each level hiding an egg, with the exception of the flight levels. Afterwards, you can hatch these eggs with the Pocket Station. Choose one of those dragonflies using one of the options of any dragon pedestal, and they will give you little gameplay upgrades, like Spyro taking up to 5 hits, point at gems, break chests, and other stuff. These dragonfly eggs are also present in the Japanese version of Spyro 2. Overall, I gotta say, this version of the game, as strange as it is, definitely felt like playing a brand new game rather than playing a localized version. Make no mistake, this is not an improved version of Spyro. Sure, the vibe is somewhat there still and you can totally still beat the game, but it definitely feels a lot more jarring than the Western versions. However, it does add a brand new identity to the game that I can appreciate as its own type of bad. A Japanese localization type of bad. One that, after knowing what I know about the reasons behind these changes, I can appreciate at least a little bit more. By the way, there is one more change that is actually a reward when you complete the game 120%. So it could be considered a New Game Plus thing. What is that reward, you may ask? Well, it is none other than the option to revert to the Western camera and movement. It is so absolutely baffling and amazing at the same time. I guess some fraction of the Japanese audience did not like the new implementations to the game, and the localization team decided to just add it as a New Game Plus. Well, it is a reward, alright? But yeah, that's the Japanese version of Spyro 1. An awful version of the game, yet such an interesting one. Definitely falls into the so bad it's good category for these kinds of games. I would not have made this video if I didn't find it at least somewhat interesting anyway, so there's that. But as I said in the beginning, that wasn't the only Spyro game that got a Japanese version. And let me tell you, the sequel, while it did keep some of the changes the first game had, it definitely felt like a worse experience. Spyro 2, labeled as Ripto's Rage in America and Gateway to Glimmer in Europe, was a sequel that took everything from the first game and made it better. As I mentioned before, it is my favorite Spyro game. The gameplay feels a lot more responsive and satisfying to go through. The worlds show a lot more variety, and there are added challenges within each level that you can do. Overall, it is an amazing game, and as a matter of fact, it was the first game I ever completed in my life. I felt genuinely fulfilled when I got the Infinite Fireball in Dragon Shores as a kid, and while it's something I can easily do in a day now, back then that meant a huge deal to me. This game also got a Japanese version, which got a brand new title, Spyro X Sparks Tondemo Tours, which is translated to Spyro X Sparks Outrageous Tours. And it is the game where we see the debut of many recurring characters in the Spyro franchise, such as Elora, Hunter, Zoe, the Professor, and of course, Ripto, who, as mentioned before, got his name from the katakana writing of Spyro in the first game. There is a lot to unpack from this game, so let's go one by one. The first thing we get to see is obviously the intro cutscene with Spyro entering a fake Dragon Shores portal that will lead him into Glimmer, and where he will meet the rest of the characters. And there are, in fact, a couple differences in this intro. Spyro is, once again, voiced by Akiko Yahima, and once we get to meet the rest of the characters, you'll notice a pretty peculiar change. The characters with blue eyes had them changed to black, and this applies with pretty much every character in the game that had blue eyes in the Western versions, with the apparent reason for this being that blue eyes aren't a common color type in Japan as much as black is, and that is why they got changed. Pointless? Probably. Silly? Definitely. And it's not even a change that was exclusive to this game, as it was also implemented in the Japanese version of Crash Team Racing, known there as Crash Bandicoot Racing. Going into the gameplay, however, you'll definitely see a couple differences compared to the Japanese version of the first game. The best one being the option to change the camera to active mode from the beginning in the menu, which I feel should have been a thing since the first game, but I guess they just didn't think about it. For the playthrough that I recorded, however, I decided to go with the inactive camera, as I wanted to torture myself and get the full Japanese Spyro 2 experience. There's also an integrated map at the bottom left corner to help you not be lost in the level, which you can also turn off if you want. It's all about helping the Japanese players not be overwhelmed by the massive 3D nature of the Spyro games at the end of the day. But yeah, gameplay wise, Spyro is still slow as hell even when charging. And to add insult to injury, the double jump strat that was unintended and included in Western versions was patched from this game, meaning you can no longer do stuff like completing Glimmer in one go. Anyway, after getting the talisman and going to Summer Forest to do some actual half-world exploring, you'll stumble across even more differences, such as the hint signs. The white signs now indicate the places that are located around you and also give you occasional tips. The red ones also seem to give you tips, although what's the difference between them and the white signs? I don't know. And the blue signs were completely removed from this game. Another difference from the previous game is that they removed the number order from the levels, with the Japanese portals showing only the level name and nothing more. I guess this was implemented because the localization team realized it was pointless to implement a level order to a game that was essentially an open world game, but that's just my guess. Like the previous game, this one also had many of its level names changed, just like some that kept their name from Western versions. If you wanna find out more, I link a video by Spyro PS1 is Cool in the description that has all the Japanese level names, as that's the only source where I could find them. Upon entering a brand new level, you'll be greeted by a difference that I found to be cute. The intro and outro cutscenes from the levels is narrated by both Spyro and Sparks, and other characters like Elora, Hunter, and even Moneybag sometimes.
スパイロ、ここはお坊さんたちが念力の修行をしている全テンプル。なのに雪男がやってきて大変なことになってるの。一頭の仕業よ。
僕がいれば大丈夫。ナースパックス。
よく言うよ。今は雪男も満腹してるみたいだけど、早くしないとお坊さんがみんな食べられちゃう。急いで、スパイロ。
Speaking about Spyro himself, you'll probably notice a difference in his model, as unlike the Western versions, in which they used his angry or determined looking model, in the Japanese version they made him look more innocent. I guess they just decided to take the cover art expression from the previous game and add it to the game model. Which is kinda funny because in the cover art for Spyro 2, he does look more determined than in the cover art for Spyro 1. He does retain the anime vibe though. And another fun fact is that this easygoing model used in the Japanese version of Spyro 2 will later be used in Spyro 3, a game that was not localized to Japan due to the franchise ending up not being popular over there. But it is cool that a model that got first used in the Japanese version of Spyro 2 was later used in Spyro 3. As for Sparks, just like the previous game, he does remain permanently green, with his aura changing depending on his health rather than his color. Eventually, you'll need to purchase the swimming ability in order to progress into the game, and this is where easily the worst change in this version lies. In this version, instead of holding down the square button in order to dash underwater, you have to press it repeatedly, as holding it will make Spyro dash for like a second and then stop, even if you keep holding the button. This change alone ruined a huge part of this playthrough for me. I get that it was most likely done for the same reason many of the changes in the first game were implemented, but this change is just stupid. You can only imagine how pathetic it felt having to do levels like Aquaria Towers like this. There is, however, a couple ways to make this change mechanic less annoying, if you can even believe that. The first one is a strat in which you press the square button, then the X button, and you alternate between them in order to get some semblance of the speed you're supposed to get. It's not the same as being able to dash across the water, obviously, but it makes the experience even slightly less shitty than it would be if you use only the square button. The second one is that the swimming on air glitch is in the Japanese version, meaning you can still do some skips that could help you not having to backtrack, most notably being able to complete Summer Forest without having to purchase the climbing ability in Autumn Plains. Unfortunately, you still suffer from the same annoying swimming mechanic while doing this glitch, which, definitely takes away a lot of the fun of doing it. Other miscellaneous changes include some characters having different names, the guidebook text having the label guidebook replaced with pixelated katakana in cutscenes, but oddly enough staying readable in the menu, and a little boom label added to the outro of Zephyr instead of flashing lights, presumably in order to prevent epilepsy, which we know our good friend Porygon may have been responsible for said change. All buttons in Summer Forest, except for the Orb Challenge one, were removed in order for the doors to stay always open, just so that the player doesn't perform a glitch that allows them to get out of bounds and get to the Crush boss battle early. And a very silly change, pretty much just like the Jack one in the previous game, is that most of the windmills in Robotica farms are all stopped, in favor of making the game easier. Again, personally I find this to be a pointless change, and it's not like the game will be harder if you had them still moving, but at the same time it's those kinds of Japanese changes, the ones I enjoy seeing just because of how pointless they are. The Pocket Station egg hunting feature is also present in this game, as mentioned before, and it does serve the same purpose of giving Spyro some abilities like taking extra damage from enemies. Okay, I need to mention something. Unlike the previous game, which I thought had some value in terms of its weirdness, I did not enjoy the overall experience of this game. It just felt a lot slower and jarring to get through, and there were challenges that definitely were a lot worse to attempt in this game compared to the Western versions. The most annoying challenge I had to deal with in the whole game might actually come as a surprise to you, because it's something that takes a few seconds in the Western versions. I'm talking about chasing this specific thief in Shady Oasis. Look at this, don't lickety split. Now take a guess at how long it took me to get this same thief in the Japanese version. 20 minutes. I am absolutely not joking. I spent almost the entire time trying to get this guy with the inactive camera. It's impossible. I ended up changing cameras in order to get that guy. I even tried shooting that green slime ball at him. He just avoided it completely. Easily the worst challenge in this version of the game. Aside from that, like I said before, the swimming mechanic being changed definitely takes a lot of the fun away from the overall experience, and the slower pace made things a lot more annoying, especially in Fracture Hills and Shady Oasis. The backtrack on these levels was painful. But anyway, I managed to complete this game as well, got to Dragon Shores and got the Infinite Fireball. But instead of feeling like I completed my favorite Spyro game, it felt like I just got out of a war zone. I genuinely did not enjoy this version of Spyro 2, and it makes me glad that you can change the camera from the get-go, because that will easily make the experience ever so more bearable. I decided to keep the inactive camera just because I wanted to see if I could beat the game like that, and given that stupid thief challenge, I clearly could not do it. Overall, I will say this: Japanese Spyro 1 was weird and bad, but it was still interesting to go through, and it falls into the category of Western games radically changed by Japan that are worth checking out because of just how fascinating they are. But Japanese Spyro 2 is just annoying. The limited swimming and slow movement are the two factors that made me dislike that version more than anything. It didn't feel as fascinating as the first game did, it just felt plain bad. And it's a version I will probably not replay for the foreseeable future. Anyway, after Spyro 2, Spyro did not get any new Japanese games other than Spyro Advance, which was the Japanese version of Spyro Season of Ice for the GBA, but the franchise was clearly doing poorly in Japan, unlike Crash Bandicoot, who got all PS1 games localized there, and even PS2 and GBA titles. In fact, I may talk about Japanese versions of Crash games someday in the future, as it sounds like an interesting topic to dive into as well. Spyro 3, as you may already know, didn't see the light of day in Japan officially until the Reignited trilogy. And while it technically is cool that Japanese gamers get to experience the game in the form of a remake, part of me wishes the original Spyro 3 came out in Japan back in the day with its shitty camera and stuff. I can only imagine how it will look like and what kind of differences it will have. Kind of lame that it never got localized, but I also understand why. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is my first video of 2025, and I'm not gonna bore you with why I've been gone so long, because it all just boils down to me being busy with real life and having almost no time to work on content as consistently as I could in the past. That said though, I find better to take my time with this rather than put stuff out consistently that I know won't be good. I'm a believer in quality over quantity after all. But yeah, with that said, if you enjoyed this type of content, please consider liking and subscribing, as that is what helps my channel the most. And I do, in fact, work pretty much on these videos on my own, from recording most of the gameplay you see, to writing the script, recording, and editing the video. So your support is greatly appreciated. I do plan on uploading more stuff here and there, but it won't be frequent. So just a heads up for everyone. If you wanna find me elsewhere, I'm mostly active on Bluesky and on Twitch, where I stream regularly, and will appreciate you dropping by and saying hi. But yeah, thank you guys again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.